And welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Dawg Talk Podcast, episode 75, on the road to episode 100. We will get there before Georgia's season kicks off next year. I'm Harrison Reno, back alongside me, co-host Dan Kiley. It's not like I haven't talked with Dan in like a week, even though I talked to him on the phone today. I've been texting him probably throughout the weekend, and we did a show last Thursday, a bonus episode for our people with Georgia Bulldogs legend Aaron Murray. But with that being said, Dan, let's jump right into this show. Kind of an emotional show. Going to be an emotional show. It's been an emotional weekend for all of us. And I want to take the time and just offer my prayers and my condolences. I want to offer the prayers and condolences of everyone who watches the show, because I know their thoughts and prayers have been with the families of Devin, Willock, and Chandler, LeCroy, along with Warren McClendon and Tory Bowles, who were all involved in an accident early Sunday morning around 2:45. The four of them were involved in a car accident that took the lives of Devin Willock, UG offensive lineman, started a couple games at guard, and a staff member who worked on the recruiting staff, Chandler LeCroy. And it's hit both me and Dan. And Dan's going to get to how it's hit him, but it's affected me seeing it because I've had some people that have had their lives taken away in my life over the years. Granted, I've been on this earth for a short amount of time compared to some people. Sorry, Dan. But, it still affects me. And Devin Willock's only a year or two older than I am. So, same thing with Chandler. It sucks to see, and it's, an emotional time for everyone. And it just sucks what happened. I mean, that's the understatement of the year. Like, you never want to see it. And it's still kind of surreal to me, Dan. Like, I don't know either of these two. I didn't know either of these two people. And you hear all the outpouring of, love for them. It's like, dang, like, it feels like I knew them.
Well, absolutely. And like you said, certain things hit people different ways, right? And for me, the reason it hits me the way it hits me is because I lost my brother at 20 years old. And he reminds me a lot of Willock. He was a giant human being, just like Willock. And like you said, we don't know them, right? So like I hurt because, they're part of the, people that we follow and we know of them. But the reason I hurt a little bit is not for a personal reason other than I know firsthand exactly what those parents and siblings and the closest people to them are going to feel. Having lost my brother at 20 years old, I mean, people lose a lot of different people, but you're not supposed to lose your little brother that early, right? Like, he had his entire life in front of him, and that was gone. So translate that to this young man. He had an extremely bright future. The one thing that sticks in my mind is he didn't do anything wrong. He wasn't guilty of anything. He is an extremely good kid. His parents did a phenomenal job of raising him. I know after somebody passes away, more times than not, everybody's got great things to say about somebody, right? But if you hear the stories about him, if you saw through his actions what he was about, taking time to spend time with that little kid at the Roadhouse in Athens right before, hours before getting in that car, taking the time out. I mean, it's what people do, right? Like, good people do things like that. And that's where your heart breaks, is that such a good young person gone so early. And then on a personal note, I know how his family feels having lost somebody at that age. It's extremely difficult. My mother's still not the same. I mean, this was 2009. My mother is not the same. She has never recovered from that. So my thoughts and prayers go out to his family and the people closest, and then also to Chandler. And then, not even that, it doesn't stop there. It's the people who are, I believe I read a report that SVP was one of the first people on the scenes, and he actually held him as he took his last breath. Man, that's going to be hard for him to deal with. There's a lot of that, but we don't want to dwell on all that stuff. It's extremely difficult. People are going to grieve for quite a while, but we did want to do our part and let you know that we are 100% aware, and we feel that loss just as much as you do.
Absolutely. And with that, Dan, let's kind of transition into the rest of the show. But as Dan said, we wanted to let everyone know that our prayers are with them and everyone involved. Latest reports are obviously, uh, as y'all may have seen, Tori Bowles is still in the hospital. Last report said she was in critical condition. So please keep your prayers for her as she continues to make her recovery back to full health, and obviously keep them with the McClendon family, who, according to reports, was released from the hospital with some laceration, I believe the word was, across his forehead. So please keep your prayers with everybody, especially with those two families that lost their loved ones, and not only their families but their friends. Georgia, the whole Georgia football program lost two great souls, two great people to this tragic accident Saturday night. And with that being said, Dan, let's transition into your rant of the week. Now, this is a hot one, Dan. It is a hot one considering the polarizing subject, and one I know there's bound to be disagreements, and there may even be a disagreement between me and you on this subject. So, Dan, take it away.
So my rant, it loses all significance after Harrison opens the show with a serious topic. But I'm going to rant, and I'm going to call this rant, "Hey, Stetson." And I wanted to talk to Stetson. And I know that this is going to be a hot button issue because everything that Stetson does is a hot button issue. However, what he did on the parade day and all of that, and the way he handled himself up there, I'm not going to go into all the stuff that people are saying. I'm not going to go into all that. So there's two completely different angles to take this. There is the one side who says, how dare you, Stetson? How dare you? And then there's the other side who says Stetson doesn't owe you anything. Both of you are right. Both of you are right. Stetson doesn't owe you anything, and Stetson is allowed to make whatever decision he wants to. The argument for a lot of people is there are a lot of people who have said bad, mean things about Stetson over the last 3 years. 100% accurate. You're not wrong. But I'm going to approach this from a different angle. Unfortunately for Stetson, he plays the most polarizing position in any sport in the world, the quarterback position. So guess what? Even if you're a great one, they're still going to say negative things about you. That's always going to happen. People had negative things to say about Peyton Manning. His last year that he won the Super Bowl, they talked about how he couldn't throw the football, right? They said bad things about him. We can start this conversation by talking about Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan played in this city, I believe it was 13, possibly 14 years. 50% of this fan base never wanted him. The media shit on him. Everybody shit on him. And they had awful things to say about Matt Ryan every single week. The things that they said about Matt Ryan were far worse than what they're saying about Stetson Bennett. And this guy was a league MVP. He took a team that doesn't have a winning history to consecutive winning seasons, take them to the Super Bowl. There are no measurables where you can say anybody else was a better quarterback than Matt Ryan in the history of the Atlanta Falcons. Yet this city shit on him for 13 years. But every single press conference Matt Ryan had, he was a professional. He didn't listen to that. He didn't worry about that. He went up there. He was a face of the franchise. He represented the franchise with the utmost professionalism as possible. The reason this is a big deal is because Stetson is going to be an NFL quarterback. He wants to be an NFL quarterback. Every NFL franchise watched that, and they're going to ask him questions. He just created more work for him to do. He just created more doubt for him. You can do everything right. And by all accounts, Stetson has kept this below the surface and done it right for 3, 4, 5, 7 years, whatever the case may be. And spare me that he's young thing. He's 25 years old. All right. I understand he's upset. I get it. He has every right to be upset. But there's a time and a place to do things. LeBron James there are people, and they're wrong, but there are people who say negative things about LeBron James constantly, every single day. There are people who diss KD every single day, say terrible things about KD. KD didn't handle it well every single time either. He created a fake burner account so that he could fight people and make arguments. And that cost him, right? I mean, he doesn't have the same perception around him that he always did. So my point is with Stetson, man, I get it. I understand why you're upset, but there's a time and a place to do things. And the vocal minority are always the loudest. I understand the media, the majority of the media had negative things to say all the time. A vocal minority of this fan base had awful things to say about you, but the majority of the fan base here did support you, whether you want to believe that or not. It's true. They supported you. Did they ask questions from time to time? That's fair. They did. But the majority of this fan base did not rip you to the point where it wasn't that bad. Like the minority did. The minority, they're just awful humans. But that's every single fan base has a percentage of their fan base that are just awful people. I want great things for Stetson Bennett, and he did so many great things, and he had such great will at Georgia. And I hope, and Harrison, you and I were talking about this on the phone. You have people who have had entire careers and they have been popular and they've done everything right their entire career. And then they say one thing, they're canceled, their career is gone. They've lost everything because of one thing. And I'm hoping for Stetson that didn't reach those levels to where he jeopardized his future. But I guarantee you there are general managers, there are owners of NFL teams who saw that and they're like, yeah, that's a hard no for me. Because listen, he is not going to be appealing to every single owner from the beginning. So he has a smaller window. He's not Peyton Manning coming out of college where everybody wants to take him number one. He's not Bryce Young. Now, you can make the argument he's better than Bryce Young. That's a completely different conversation, right? But he's got a small window of opportunity. It's kind of like Jake Fromm. Jake Fromm, somebody was hell-bent on sabotaging Jake Fromm, but they pulled something out of his past where he said something negative, and it really hurt him. He never recovered from it. He got drafted by a team or whatever, but nobody's really wanting to bring him in the locker room. And by all accounts, he was the perfect person to have in the locker room, right? I mean, that's what we always heard, is that everybody loved Jake Fromm. But, I mean, one bad thing, and that's where my hope is with Stetson, is that he didn't ruin it with one bad thing. And I hope he understands there are so many Georgia fans that love him and appreciate everything that he ever did. And it's been weighing heavy on my heart, and I wanted to get it out there. And please, I hope you're not taking it like I'm just pooping on Stetson. I promise you I'm not. I want great things for that young man, and I just hope he didn't, even by 1%, I hope he didn't hurt himself down the road. And that's why I felt it was necessary to do this rant, like an open letter to Stetson Bennett. Is like, just please understand, the majority of us loved you and wanted great things for you.
You know, Dan, I think the way you put it there, I get where you're coming from, and I see why you wanted to do this rant, because it obviously means something to you. Now, if it didn't, you wouldn't have done it. You would have taken this to the whole another degree of, Stetson Bennett, you got carried, you didn't do anything in Georgia, you got carried on this, and you shouldn't be able to do this and that. If Dan actually didn't like the guy, it could have done that easily. Now, we would have been at odds because of it, but Dan didn't do that. Dan came on here and gave his opinion. But here's Dan. We talked about it Saturday, after the parade and all that, and the way I took it is, when he was on the stage and talking, his last words given to him by DJ Shockley, that chance to do that, I didn't see it as him talking to the fans, as him talking to the haters. I took it as he was talking to the media, he was talking to his doubters and saying, you doubted us, you thought we were going to lose, and we kept winning, and screw it. Screw all your opinions, we got 2 rings type deal. I didn't take that as him hating on the fans. I took it as, hey, he's talking directly to his doubters and saying, we won a championship despite the fact of what you said and all that. And basically telling them, hey, you wanted to do some damage. You wanted to kind of get in our heads. Well, you did the opposite. You motivated us to go win a championship, to go win 2 rings. That's the way I took it. Now, I know there is a part of the fan base that were upset about him being on his cell phone during the parade. They didn't like that. There was an attempted interview with Stetson Bennett during the parade where she thinks or said on national television that he must not be able to hear us with all the fans there. To others, the other sick ass Stetson just straight up ignored her. And I don't know what happened.
Again, time and place, right? Like and we had a conversation, we talked about this. I said, if he wanted to have a sit down interview with anybody, it could have been anybody, Maria Taylor, for example, Georgia girl. He could have sat down and said, hey, listen, you know what? All these people said all these different things, time and place, right? And that's the part I'm coming from with ownership, because ownership, when they're looking at a player who's going to be representing them, they have to make sure that when they put this guy in front of the camera and he's got the entire team name behind him, that he's going to act right when he has to. And my one example for this was Zach Wilson, right? Zach Wilson was a starting quarterback, New York Jets, and he got up on the stage and he didn't know how to handle himself at that moment. And when he didn't, he absolutely tanked his career. I mean, they not only did they bench him, the locker room turned on him. They were wearing T-shirts with like "We roll with Mike White" the next week. I mean, they turned on him like that. You know, he said no. All he said was no. 2 letters, 1 word, N-O, no. That's all he said. Stetson went way above that. It didn't matter who he was talking to, as there was a microphone in his face. DJ Shockley isn't 100% blameless in this either, because he asked Stetson a question he didn't want to answer. And Stetson said, I'd rather not. And then he pressed him for an answer. So you got to have, and that's why, like, DJ is not savvy. I'm not picking on DJ. I'm just saying, like, he doesn't have that savvy, like if Reese Davis was doing the interview, who's been doing this for years and years and years and years, like a expert interviewer would know, like, oh, I got to change directions. I need a veer right here, because he's not wanting to talk about that. And DJ pressed him. So it was just unfortunate, because it was such a joyous occasion. I thought he could handle a little bit better, but my concern is not, I'm not coming from the angle of I hate Stetson. I'm coming from the angle of that man has meant so much to so many people over the years. I hope not even 1%. I just hope not even 1% that he hurt his future. So all right, let's go. What do you got,
Dan? He just issued a statement via Twitter, and I think it's, since we're talking about it, we might as well hit it. He said, full article, quote unquote, full article here. Issues and apology, says, and I quote for those on podcast, I am sorry to the fans who felt unappreciated. That couldn't be further from the truth. I was just playing some tunes. Then he goes on to post a screenshot of a statement, quote unquote, Mr. Med Rare.
He called Steak Shapiro Mr. Medium Rare.
One, quote unquote, one phone was mine. One phone was connected to Bluetooth. Mine had the playlist. The other had the aux. I appreciate your concern with my image, intentions, loyalties, and obligations, as well as your willingness to reach out to me to confirm them. You obviously thought quite deeply about some motives I might have had. To help fill in some holes, though, I can give you the, quote, inside scoop. He continues, quote unquote, parades are a simple celebration. While last year's was a celebration of that championship, this year's parade was a celebration of a very special period of time for me. Of course, there's the possibility that I'm wrong. And while we as a team very much so appreciate the fans, we as individuals appreciate our teammates. You know, the ones we've broken bones and torn ligaments and blood for, and cried and changed and grown and laughed with for years now. So to help you fill in those damage holes, team celebrate with fans in big parade. Teammate celebrate with teammate in a small personal car. Guess which I am? Teammate. Yep. Knew you'd color quick. So to finish it off nice and neat, I was controlling the aux and playing bangers so Sed and Chris and I could have a blast on our last ride into Sanford. That's pretty much the gist of it. And I'm going to stop there. If you want to see more of how he ends it, you can go check him out on Twitter. Dan, I didn't expect that to come very quickly. No, that came out quick.
Hold on. You got to say, he's like, and by the way, I'm not a big fan of yours, Mr. Steak and Shake Shapiro. Hey, Stetson, you and I are in the same boat. I don't think he's that great personality either. And you know what? He deserves I have criticized Steak Shapiro way more than I've ever criticized Stetson Bennett. So if you want to call me a steak hater, I am a steak hater. I was happy when he got let go of 680 The Fan, because that's my favorite radio station. And I would turn it off when he was on the radio. So you know what? Hell yes, Stetson. I agree with that. Again, I got nothing but love. I got nothing but love for that boy.
And with that being said, yes, Robert and Dan just died. With that being said, let's kind of transfer into our last topic of the day. Damn, we're already 20 minutes in. Whew. Guys, thank you for joining us. If you're already here with us, been here the whole time, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button so you can kind of help us share this more content. We do it every Tuesday at 7:30. Hey, maybe we add in an extra episode here and again throughout the offseason, because me and Dan spoke about it privately. We want more guests. We want more people. I talked to Robert of the DGD Podcast. Robert, I'm going to put you on the spot, bud. We want Robert Reynolds of the DGD Podcast to come on to the show. Whether it's live, whether it's pre-tape, we want to talk with you, Rob. We want to chop it up with you. I think you and Dan would have a blast on here. So, Robert, open invitation to you. Hey, maybe we do another call-in show, Dan. Get people like Zach, Rudes, all these people that have tuned in the show, come join us again and give us their thoughts and takes on everything regarding Georgia football. Options are open, guys. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. And hey, we hit 100 subscribers. We may get somebody on, somebody you want at your request. We will try to do it. So with that being said, Dan, the transfer portal is going crazy. It's been going crazy. It's been going crazy since what? December 5th, December 6th, I believe was the date. Right around the time the SEC championship finished up, transfer portal opened, and people started hitting that portal. I believe it's closed, or it's coming to a close soon, and people got to enter. And Georgia's had a fair bit of entries, Dan. Looking at my notes, at the note sheets, Georgia's had players, Bill Norton, Eric Gilbert, Brett Seither, Jaheim Singletary, Rylan Godey, MJ Sherman, Jacob Hood, Tresman Marshall, and most recently, Dominic Blaylock. A lot of people who love the University of Georgia. There is nothing that can deny that. All these players, from what the media is reporting, love Georgia, wanted to stay at Georgia, and just turned out it wasn't going to work out. That's how things are these days. You know, sometimes you playing time, scholarship limit just don't work out. All of it just doesn't work out, and you got to move on. Some players move on from programs by themselves. Some programs kind of force players out. It's just the nature of the business in college football. I know we didn't want that to come. We didn't want it to happen, but the cold hard truth is it's been happening for years, especially at the lower levels. People have been let go. People have been kind of forced out of programs for years. Kind of get your scholarships taken away, and people have to move on. And that's kind of what's happening here at the big programs now with the way the NCAA has kind of carelessly throughout all these things, from the transfer portal to NIL. It's happening more and more. So, Dan, I want your take. First off, Dan, people said they kind of saw it coming, or they thought it may happen, but man, losing Dominic Blaylock, dude, that sucks. He is one of my favorite players. He's been one of my favorite players. I hate it that he can't finish his career here at Georgia because of everything, all the adversity he's faced. But I am happy at the fact that he's going to a place where he can pick and choose, a place where he can get guarantees that, hey, I'm going to go to the best place possible to get to the NFL.
You know, the one thing that we've always said on this show, and we've joked around about it, and we've joked around it with Jonathan Jeremiah as well, is that once you get injured, Kirby kind of like moves you to the back of the line, and he almost never has a spot for you to come back and be a full-time contributor. If you go back to the history of Kirby's time here, guys who have been injured, I mean, outside of like Zamir White, and to some extent Dominic Blaylock, because Kirby did make room for him, but it's almost like once you get injured, you're kind of like, I can't use you. It's like, I can't trust you, whatever the case may be. And that's a perception. I'm not saying it's real. It's just a perception. So Dominic Blaylock, you know, I mean, sometimes they say that they read the, you know, the writing that's on the wall, and there's some of these guys on this list that like really surprised me. And if you believe all the stuff that's on behind all these paywalls and stuff, a lot of these, and I'm not going to say names or anything like that because, you know, it's a paid service or whatever. But, you know, some of these kids who I really wanted to stay, and I'm really shocked that they didn't stay, were basically told by Kirby, you got to go. And we don't have room for you. There's one name on here, an extremely highly rated player who, according to this person behind the paywall, begged Kirby to stay. And it's like, I just don't have room for you. And that's just, like you said, this part of the business now. Is the world we live in. It's a much different time now. I hate to see so many good players leaving. Just go through the list. We're not going to go hit every one of them, but Eric Gilbert. Sorry, his mother said it's Eric. Eric Gilbert had such high hopes for him. Brett Seether did a great job while he was here. Obviously, that one makes sense. Jaheim Singletary, 5-star kid. You thought he had a real opportunity. Clearly, it's not going to work out for him. MJ Sherman, that one. MJ Sherman is the one name on this list that I was like, huh? But again, sometimes it's hard to find playing time. And then Dominic Blaylock, I think every last one of us appreciates what he's done here. And I think it was either you or somebody else said that. He basically won a couple games for us single-handedly. Was it you? I think it was you said like in 2020 or was it 2019? He won a game.
I think it was 19. 19 was his freshman year, and he was one of Georgia's leading receivers, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely.
It was Cager, Pickens, and I think Blaylock may have been second or third receiving yards. And he was a favorite target of Jake Fromm. Had that highlight touchdown play against Auburn. Got off to a pretty good start against LSU in the SEC championship game. That was his first ACL tear, and we haven't seen much of him since. But even to this day, Dan, when he returned to play and was fully healthy this season, you go watch the tape. Georgia still designed some shots to him. Yep. The slot fade against Florida comes to mind. They had a similar play against Ohio State. I don't know if it was exactly a fade route, but I do remember them throwing up a ball to Dominic Blaylock. They were still designing some shot plays for him and getting them involved. But at the end of the day, you need more than just a few plays a game to go to the NFL and to get drafted as high as you can. And Dan's talked about on this program, there's a huge difference between getting drafted first overall in the first round to getting drafted in the 10th or 10th overall in the first round. And I'm not saying Dominic Blaylock's going first round, but that comparison just kind of shows you there is a big drop-off money-wise in between these draft picks. So we wish them all the best. We wish all these guys all the best and hope they get to go play.
The one name you don't have on this list, and obviously nothing official's come out or anything like that, but there's a lot of smoke around A.D. Mitchell, and that's the one player I don't want to see leave. Like, I think he's an extremely special wide receiver. And, it's been reported by multiple outlets that one of the teams sniffing around. I'm not going to say it because, like, Brooks had it behind his paywall, but it's out. It's out there for public consumption, so I shouldn't.
It's all over Twitter.
Yeah, but anyway, there's a specific team that wants him, and I just won't say it because I respect Brooks too much, and I don't want him to think I'm spilling tea. So, if he goes there, I'm gonna be pissed. If he goes to NFL, all power to you. I get it. Like that's a business decision, and like with him, if he goes to NFL, I get it. But if he goes to another school, I'm gonna be pissed. And I don't get mad when people leave. I try not to. But that one will piss me off. If he leaves, that one – I didn't even care when Burton left last year. But if A.D. Mitchell leaves, I'll be pissed because I really, really, really like that guy. And he's a focus here, too. And that's the other thing, too, is like Burton left because he didn't feel like he was going to get the targets, right? Explainable. A.D. Mitchell, if he's on this roster, he's going to be the number one wide receiver.
Yeah. And, he showed what difference he can make against Ohio State. Made a difference late in that ball game. He's caught touchdowns in every playoff game he's ever played in. We talked about that last week or the week before. And in the 4 playoff games he's played, he has 4 touchdowns, maybe a little bit more. I don't remember exactly. I remember he threw a touchdown. He had a touchdown. Well, no, he caught a touchdown pass from what's his name? From Kenny, I believe it was Kenny McIntosh. But he's just an impact player at the end of the day. That's what A.D. Mitchell is. And if he stays on Georgia's roster, if he stays at Georgia, great. He's going to be the number one target for Georgia. If rumors, as they're going around Twitter, say he leaves, we'll see.
Can I hit this one by
Absolutely.
So DGD Podcast asks, what is causing all this? It may be a rhetorical question. Robert's a smart guy. He knows a lot of different people. So my take on it is twofold. One, they're not good enough to get on the field. And I say that respectfully, okay, because they're extremely talented kids. But they're having a hard time getting on the field. That's one. And the second part of it is working as hard as Kirby wants you to work is not for everybody. And I think it's one of those things where it's easy to say you're about it, but then living that life is completely different. That's kind of like the people who say, new year, new me. I'm going to commit to the gym. I'm going to go work hard every single day. They do it for a week or so. And they're like, man, that is too hard. I ain't about that life. And then they don't go back to the gym. And then next January, they're like, new year, new me. I'm back in the gym. There's a reason why gyms are packed in January. And then come February, they're back to being empty. So I fall, for me, my personal opinion is it's either one or the other. Either they realize that there's just so much talent that they're not going to get the playing time they want, or the second part of it is I think they find out how hard Kirby wants you to work, and it's just not for them. And it's no disrespect to anybody. It's just, I mean, they always say, like, some bosses are like Bobby Knight. Some people could play for Bobby Knight. Some people couldn't. And I think Kirby is that way. I think Nick Saban was that way for a long time. I don't know that Nick Saban is as hard as he used to be, but, it's just there are some coaches that are very demanding and they expect perfection all the time, and that wears on some people. And I'm just saying that could be part of it. So I don't know. Do you have a take on it, Harrison?
I think you hit on it earlier in the fact that I think everyone's hit on it lately is the roster's getting huge. I mean, you have 85 scholarships at a point where the NCAA has said anybody who played in 2020 was a current athlete or didn't even have to play in 2020 was eligible in 2020, has a free year of eligibility with no ramifications, no extensions to the scholarship limit to account for just carelessly giving it to anybody who wants it. And now we're seeing why, what the effect is. And trust me, Georgia has benefited from that ruling unlike any other. Stetson Bennett wouldn't have been at the University of Georgia this year if it wasn't for the COVID year. That's just a fact. That's how it is. People like there's some other people on Georgia's roster. It's become a mess regarding eligibility. Who's eligible? Who's not eligible? Like how many years do they have a free year? Have they used a free year? It's a mess, and I don't want to put someone's name out there that didn't use that year. But Georgia's has benefited from that, unlike any other. They won a national championship with a quarterback who, without that rule, wouldn't have been at the University of Georgia. If they were going to win it this year without Stetson Bennett, it was going to be with Carson Beck or whoever that starting quarterback is. But without the COVID rule, Georgia would not have Stetson Bennett on the roster. So I say that, but at the same time, also have to acknowledge that Georgia's benefited from that rule, like other people will in years to come. So I just think, Dan, roster management's getting to the point in time where if you're not cutting it, if you're buried on the depth chart, and Georgia wants to bring someone else in who they think, okay, this kid has a shot to play, this kid has a shot to start, then you kind of have to cut the quote-unquote dead weight and say, okay, we know you, we don't think you have a chance of playing for us, so we're gonna let you go rather than not taking a kid who we think can play for you. So that I think that's what it boils down to is they want a kid who they think and know that can play rather than someone that's going to sit on the roster and kind of take up that roster spot and really no promises of whether or not they're going to touch the field. And I think that may be part of the reason that MJ Sherman kind of got let go. I think was it his mom or dad? I believe it was his mother that issued a statement on Twitter talking about we didn't want to leave Georgia, but we basically got told we had to go. And, that's just kind of how it worked out. And that's how Georgia's operating like the rest of college football. But with that being said, enough on the people exiting the program. Georgia's had two players that have entered the program and are creating a lot of excitement. As motivated, dedicated, said in the comment section, I think UGA will add 3 or 4 more players from the portal. I agree with you. Maybe 3 or 4, that's tough. I think Georgia's definitely going to add more motivated. I think that's definitely going to happen. Just a question of how many. Like, how many roster spots can Georgia create? Dan, you told me the other day we talked about it on Saturday, you said you heard Kirby say in an interview that he sat down with 20 players.
So he had an interview on TNT with Ernie Johnson and Charles Barkley, and he said he's talked to 20 players about either the portal or the NFL draft. So, and maybe he was exaggerating. I don't know. I'm just telling you what he said. He said because they asked him, "Are you off right now? Like, you taking it easy, or are you already back to recruiting?" He he's just talking about how busy he is and how he's not even really had a chance to get into recruiting yet because he had to talk to 20 players about either going to the draft or going to the portal. There may be, and you don't know what that conversation is. There's a very real possibility that conversation was, Coach, hey, I'm thinking about entering the portal because I don't know if there's room for me or whatever the case may be. And Kirby may be like, bro, you are 100% part of my plans. Don't even worry about it. Like, all right, Coach, that's all I wanted to hear. Thank you so much. I want to be here, right? That may be one of the conversations. Another conversation may be like, hey, come in here and sit down and talk to me because I need you to go ahead and hop in that portal. So you don't really know what the conversation is. You don't know if Kirby was just being like just throwing a number out there or if it really was 20. And again, like I said, you don't know what the conversation was. It very easily could have been like, Coach, do I have a place here? Absolutely, you have a place here. Okay, cool. I don't want to go anywhere.
Yeah, and he brings up another great point. More players will hit the portal during the spring. Some players will decide to leave, and I think that's definitely the case. Obviously, there's a lot of speculation at quarterback as to who's going to leave after the spring. If they expect to get the starting job and they're not in a position to get it, well, fans are out here, trying to predict who's going to enter the portal out of the QB competition. Nothing's been said about that.
No,
but it's a fan theory that Georgia.
I mean, if you're looking at the quarterback position on its face, right, you would think that either whoever is in the driver's seat after spring. Now, if it's really close, I don't think maybe anything happens. But if it's clear far and away to Carson Beck or Brock Vandagriff is the starter, I think the other one would probably look, especially Carson. If Carson wasn't the starter, he's got to go somewhere else. He's running out of time. He doesn't have time to wait, right? And that makes sense. I don't think anybody in the world could blame him for that. If Vandagriff weren't to get the job, maybe there's a little bit of time for him to hang tight. But if he were to leave, I think that makes sense. With Gunner, I think because there's that separation, I think Gunner could stick it out. But then also, if you believe the rumors are true that Dylan Raiola is coming in, I think if you don't win the starting job, you probably leave because it's going to be extremely difficult to hold that guy off. So I don't know. Like, you're right and motivated, dedicated. You're 100% correct. There will be more players leaving after spring practice. I think some of these players want to see how it plays out there in spring practice. Some of these players want to get ahead of it, go ahead and get into the new school so they can go through spring practice with their new team. And that makes a lot of sense too. At the end of the day, like you said, it's turning more into a business. Roster management is a real thing. And we want all of these kids to be, at least I know Harrison and I do, we want these kids to be successful and have that opportunity. And if they think that opportunity somewhere else, God bless them. Except for AD Mitchell, you better not go anywhere. Good God, you better not go anywhere. I need you here on this roster, okay?
With that being said, let's talk about what Georgia's brought into it, and get your comments in and keep putting them in there. We'll keep hitting on them until we go off air. With that being said, Georgia brought in two receivers, two people I think a lot of people are excited about. First up, Dominic Lovett, receiver from Missouri. Just kind of what I've gathered on Dominic Lovett, looking at his stats, looking at what people are saying on Twitter, kind of watching him a little bit. He's 5'10". Obviously, first things first, people are going to go, oh, he's going into the slot, Dan. He's 5'10", not tall enough to play the X. He's going in the slot. Just stereotypical predictions. But hey, in this case, it sounds pretty reasonable at this point. Georgia's losing Kyrus Jackson in the NFL draft, who's played the slot. You're losing Dominic Blaylock to the transfer portal, who entered the transfer portal not too long after Dominic Lovett kind of committed and said he's coming to Georgia. So, hey, maybe it makes sense. Maybe that's where he's going to play. Time will tell. But here's what's interesting to me, Dan. He's secretly one of the top receivers in the SEC from this past season.
I don't have an answer for that. Is there something else I can help with?
Sorry, my Siri is acting out of nowhere. But secretly, top receivers that Georgia just pulled right out of the transfer portal. He ranked third by Pro Football Focus, PFF, for overall grade by a receiver this season. Third. He was third of the nation in his overall grade. That's pretty dang impressive. The only two graded higher than him was Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State and Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State, who Georgia saw in the postseason. He's in pretty good company there, Dan. He had 846 yards on 56 receptions with 3 touchdowns. Hey, Georgia's going to need help.
Man, when I heard we were getting a wide receiver from Missouri, I was really hoping it was Luther Burden. That's the receiver from Missouri that I would love to have on this roster. Obviously, they see some talent in this guy, and he put up some decent numbers. Obviously, those numbers would rank really, really high on Georgia's team. But we didn't really focus on one guy like that. But Luther Burden, there was a lot of talk that he wasn't happy at Missouri, and I was really hoping we could stoke that fire. But I think Dominic Lovett fits the need. Absolutely. And Kirby's not bringing somebody on here to stand on the sideline. So maybe that was the writing on the wall for Dominic Blaylock whenever he saw somebody coming in who, like you said, on paper fits the mold of what Dominic does well. And that might Zach. You killed me, Zach. But Ra Thomas is the other guy, Harrison. And Ra 6'2". Guy who can play on the outside, guy can get up and go, 2 years of eligibility left. Like you said, 626 yards, 7 touchdowns. That would rank high on this Georgia list.
Oh, absolutely. I think Dominic Lovett would be Georgia's second leading receiver, second or third. Brock Bowers is first out of statistically for receiving yards. I don't know where Ladd McConkey ranks exactly compared to the two, but they would be right up there. And Ra Thomas, like you said, would be right up there with them. And like Dan said, this is a guy who's 6'2". He brings that frame that you want to play on the outside. He did it at Mississippi State, and we're going to see exactly where he plays here at Georgia. And, hey, we got it motivated, dedicated. D. Lovett reminds me of Deebo Samuel. He needs at least 5 targets a game. Hey, that's a comp that I haven't heard. Now, I haven't seen many comps for the 2 transfer guys that Georgia's got, but if Georgia can get a Deebo Samuel level player at receiver, my God, Dan, would that be scary?
Yeah, I'm not 100% on the can you expand on your comp? Because I know they're not exactly the same size. Hold on, I'm trying to pull up Deebo's height because
to me, Dan, what he's talking about, if Motivate, tell me if I'm wrong. He's saying Lovett's a yak guy, a yards after the catch guy. And that's what Deebo makes his money on. He made it at SC, kind of making it, in San Francisco, by the way, an explosive offense. But a yards after the catch guy, somebody who can play in the slot, somebody you can move around. I don't know if Dominic Lovett's going to play in the backfield, kind of like Deebo did for South Carolina, and especially in the league now. But shoot, a yards after the catch monster kind of fits the need here for Georgia to pair him with, another yards after the catch monster and Ladd McConkey, a guy that can take the top off the defense with his height, go up and get a jump ball with A.D. Mitchell, and potentially another one, Ra Thomas. Those are some lethal weapons, not to mention you got Brock Bowers and Arian Smith.
I don't know that much about Lovett, but I know a lot about Samuel. And I just looked up his height and weight. Obviously, he's 215 pounds, but he's only 6 foot. So there's not that much of a height difference between 5'10" and 6 foot, right? They're in the same neighborhood. In cleats, they're right there. So that might absolutely be a banger of a freaking comparison. And forgive me for not knowing Dominic Lovett the way that you guys do. But I do know Deebo Samuel. I know a lot about him. And obviously Deebo plays taller than he is. I thought he was 6'2", 6'3". He's only 6 foot. So that might be a hell of a comp by you, Motivated.
Hey, we may need to clip that and save that for later. I'm definitely, if I clip it, it would be going out onto the Twitter timeline. So Motivated. If you don't, by the way, follow us on Twitter, guys. We don't plug it enough. We plug it at the end of the show. And with the way the channel's building for channels that don't have thousands of followers right off the bat, people don't stick around to the end of the show. So, hey, let us know in the comments, by the way. If you stick around for the end of the show, let us know. But I'm going to go ahead and plug it here, Dan, so we can kind of get the audience here. If you don't follow us on Twitter, go follow Dan Kiley at DanKiley3 on Twitter. Follow me at Harrison Reno on Twitter. And Motivated, especially if you aren't following us already, that comp is going to be on the timeline of both of ours. Hey, anybody else that has some comps, put them in there. We're going to put it on the timeline and definitely keep that in our bookmarks to see how those comps fare over the next few years. Dan, before we wrap up the show, we talked about roster movement. We've talked about players incoming, we've talked about players outgoing. There's some staffing changes that are maybe on the horizon, maybe not on the horizon. There's Bama fans all up in the Twitter timeline talking about, oh my God, we're going to take one of Georgia's best position coaches, their co-defensive coordinator. We're going to make him our defensive coordinator. Just the ultimate power move. we're taking your guy. We're going to give him more money, and maybe we give him a head coach in waiting title, which Dan talked about over the weekend in our text feed. Hey, I don't know. Dan, I want your take first on Glenn Schumann and the Alabama defensive coordinator rumors.
So if you listen to the argument for Glenn Schumann, one is that he graduated or went to school at Alabama. Okay, well, Kirby went to Georgia, and Kirby did not and was not going to leave Alabama unless he was the head coach. And that was the right move for him. He understood the game. He long played it. He was at Alabama, I believe it was 10 years. And if I'm wrong, I'm only wrong by a year or so. So he was at Alabama with Nick Saban. He knew it was the best place for him. He wasn't going to leave until he got a head coaching job. And I said this before. Anybody else said this, so I don't want any like, oh, I read that somewhere. The only way Schumann's leaving this job is if he's promised that head coaching job. And I don't know that Alabama would do that right now. And Harrison and I were talking, and I was laughing. I was like, man, the head coach in waiting thing was really popular for 5 minutes. And I believe that stopped at about 2010 with Will Muschamp. Will Muschamp was promised the Texas job, and he ended up taking the Florida job instead. And then Mac Brown decided he wanted to coach for a couple more years. But really, outside of that, there was another one too. Is that really breaking news? I mean, I didn't know that was even in question, Harrison. What are we doing?
He just announced it. Everyone's been wondering where that decision was. But sorry about that, Dan. Continue.
I don't even know what the hell I was saying. I
it was Will Muschamp. Will Muschamp, head coach in waiting.
Yeah, so it just didn't work out well. It just did not work out well in that scenario. And then somebody else was a head coach in waiting and actually got the job and then bombed at it. So it's just I don't know that they're willing to do that. I would be beyond shocked if he left Georgia to go to Alabama for the same job. And if it's just about money, it's not a problem for Georgia unless Georgia just doesn't want to pay him or if they're just really comfortable with him not being here. But I find that hard to believe because we've never heard anything outside of Georgia coming. We've never heard anything coming out of Georgia that they didn't absolutely love Glenn Schumann. So I would be very shocked if he left. He's from Alabama thing. You can that doesn't sway my opinion.
With Glenn Schumann and people's dream scenarios, they announce them as their head coach in waiting. I don't even know how long Nick Saban intends to be around. It would, to me, Dan, if Nick Saban announces tomorrow and hires Glenn Schumann and announces him as the head coach in waiting, basically just telling the world, hey, I intend to retire soon.
After this season.
Yeah, it could blow up in their face.
Oh, well,
it could blow up absolutely in their face.
Now, listen, you just brought up a point that I hadn't talked about, which was if Nick Saban called Glenn Schumann and said, I want you to be the defensive coordinator for this year, next year, you're going to be the head coach. I'm only coaching one more year. That 100% would motivate him to leave. And I think Kirby would help him pack. I mean, if he's guaranteed the Alabama head coaching job, and the one thing Kirby has said over and over again is that he wants success for his people. He loves them, supports them, will do anything. He was extremely authentically happy for Dan Lanning when he got the Oregon job. He felt it was a great fit, a great opportunity. He helped Dan Lanning go. Like he did not hold him back. There was no ill will. There was no grudge. I think if that scenario that you just pointed out where Nick Saban was to say, this is my last year, you're going to be head coach next year. I don't think you would be foolish to not do that. The end.
Absolutely. And what I was saying, is I think that's the only scenario where they take it, but I just don't see Nick Saban announcing that title for anybody, any hire, because I think it could hurt the program in the long run of, hey, we may have some recruits decommit because they want to look around because they're not going to go play for Nick Saban. You feel me? That's kind of where I was going. And last piece, Tom Monken. It's been a rumor ever since he came to Georgia. It's been a rumor ever since he started to get success. Tom Monken going back to the NFL, it's a rumor. It's being brought up over and over again. He was a candidate for a few head coach openings this fall. Ended up not getting any of them just yet. May get them later. Coaching carousel still a thing, still going on. May get a job in a little bit. But the NFL coaching carousel hasn't even started yet. Obviously, there's some openings with head coaching jobs in the NFL. Arizona Cardinals, the Carolina Panthers, among others. Where, hey, there's an opening in the NFL, and he may want to go back to it. So it's all about the ultimate end goal for Tom Monken. Does he want to go back to the NFL? Does he take a coordinating job to go to the NFL instead of staying at Georgia. I don't know. And as motivated, dedicated says here, Coach Monk is probably going to the NFL, probably back to Tampa. Hey, that is a pretty good shout out. I mean, shoot, if I'm Tom Brady, I wouldn't mind playing for Todd Monken.
Well, hold on.
That offense would be heck of an entertaining offense.
So Todd Monken released a statement about this, talking about, there's going to be people poking around. He said, but the thing that motivates me is winning. He said, I would rather be on a winning team in Alaska than a 5-5 team in San Diego, is what he said. I don't know. All right. So people can be easily fooled. However, I sat at a table with Todd Monken, who was talking to my son, who is a quarterback. Now, I'm not saying that you could be easily fooled. I get it. He seemed like a person who was extremely happy to be where he was at. He was loose. He was laid back. He talked about the future. He talked about the different things that he foresees in the Georgia future. I get it. I 100% get it. It could just be a recruiting tactic, whatever. My son's not that big of a recruiter or anything like that. I mean, we were there for no other reason than, somebody worked it out. But I really get the vibe from being around him just for that 15 minutes that he's extremely happy. And I think everybody gets to that point in their life where he is the highest paid coach in college football that's not a head coach, the highest paid assistant coach in the country. How much money does he really need at that point? And he's had an opportunity. If he had never been a head coach, whatever. If he had never had a chance to prove his wares in the NFL, I get that too. I think he understands that he's not getting fired. Like, Todd Monken's not getting fired. And he's good enough not to get fired. Like, he has enough faith in himself. I would be shocked if he left. That's just me. Everybody keeps talking about, he leaves every 3 years. I get it. And that was true. It's not a wrong statement. But I don't know. And then, here's the other thing, motivated. I see what you're saying there. Why would you want to leave a situation where you have everything you need necessary to run your offense to go to a place where there's that many questions? I don't see it. There's no reason to do it, because you can go down there to get the wrong personnel. It doesn't work. You're fired in a year. I don't think he's at the stage in his career where he's willing to do that anymore.
It's definitely an interesting situation in Tampa. Definitely something that Dan, Jeremiah, and Jonathan talk about on the 4-Wide podcast over the next few weeks, Dan, because I know you all got some off-season to cover some topics. Definitely top to talk about. If you aren't subscribed to the 4-Wide podcast, go check it out over on the Film Guy Network. They do it every Sunday at 7:30, starting at 7:30. They wrap it up over by 8:20. They review the games on Sunday, the games before, but also preview the Sunday night football game and the Monday night's game. Hey, it's postseason, guys. No better time to go check them out over there. You can catch Dan Kiley every week over there. Well, every week they have the show. Whenever they don't have to cancel that.
I do have one thing that just popped in my head, because Motivated and I kind of have a little sidebar conversation going right here. I don't know if they would do it, but I think the San Diego dude is going to lose his job. I think that San Diego dude is going to lose his job, because I think he butchered it. But Spanos doesn't like to pay people. That's a problem. So I don't know if he's willing to pay somebody not to be his head coach. I know he made the Vail reference to a 5-5 San Diego team. But with all the toys that they have, Austin Eckler and Herbert, man, if they're willing to pay him to be the head coach, I could see Monken trying that out.
Heck, even the coordinating role with the defensive-minded head coach as young and as bright as Staley. Right now, there's no Rappaport reported. There's no indications that they're going to fire Staley. They're going to move on from him. He already fired his offensive coordinator. I believe he fired his defense coordinator. I know for a fact they fired his offensive coordinator. So I think he's going to get one last chance at a run to with the postseason with them. But hey, Motivated, appreciate you for being on the show. Thank you to Robert, Zachary Moss, the GGD podcast. Make sure to go check out the GGD podcast. They are live tomorrow afternoon. Robert, put down in the comments when you're going live. And with that being said, guys, that's going to wrap up episode 50 or 70. Jeez, almost went back 20 episodes. Episode 75 of the Dawg Talk Podcast. We will see you back here next Tuesday. Robert, as I said earlier, invitation always open, my friend. We'll see you back here on the Dawg Talk Podcast at 7:30 next Tuesday. Dan, have a good weekend, or have a good rest of your week.
Thank you, brother. You too. and go Dogs!